I'll just sort of jump in, but then as we're going, please do stop me with questions, thoughts. I just sort of pulled together, thought about the last couple of days, what are some things that I've learned working with, these elementary age students, and what were some of the very fun activities that we've done together so far. So my husband and I co-founded this math circle in, 2014, a few years ago, and have been involved with the National Association of Math Circles since pretty early on. And so a lot of this you maybe have even seen through that same network. So we can talk about if we've each tried it our own way. I did want to talk about working with this younger group that's a little, I think it's maybe on the younger side of math circles. We know there's math teacher circles where you're working with adults, and then there's some middle school and high school circles, and then I don't often run into as many people who are with like 4th and 5th graders and younger, but they are out there. They're certainly out there. Our students really appreciate a lot of structure and routine, so even though we're not school, there are some habits of school that they seem to appreciate, like having an introduction. You're always coming up and getting signed in, and then you're walking in and doing a warm-up, and to grab your folder or your math journal, and your name tag. We have them all wear name tags, and that we're going to do something together up till a certain time, and then we're going to have snacks and games at the end. There's just this pattern to the day that I think, even though they're going to be jumping into something new most every day, I think it helps them go with the flow. And our student helper ratio, right now we're very fortunate because we have student helpers who are being paid through the grant that we have through the National Association of Math Circles. And we are very lucky to have about a 1-to-4 ratio with the kids between us and the helpers that we have. And if you do work with younger groups, just do keep in mind that you have to really be careful with that ratio, because with all the activities we have being often open-ended, I wouldn't go past a 1-to-10 ratio, just personally. And then there are issues with behaviors that you have to think about when you're working with younger kids. Our circle actually started out, and our logo that we made and everything was all based around 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. And we immediately saw that 3rd graders' behavior is so different than the 4th and 5th graders. So we decided to just stick with 4th and 5th graders, that they were more alike and we could handle their behaviors a little more easily. And by that I mean that there's going to be expectations you set from the beginning. We're very strict about no roughhousing, no bullying, and no weapons of any kind. And different circles might look more chaotic when you walk in the door and just kind of visit as a visitor. It's a little bit like, you're going to sit down. It's nice and calm. We don't really allow any like running around or anything like that. But we do understand sometimes the kids need to move, and we often provide little fidget toys or have them around. And we're pretty flexible in terms of moving on from something if our kids are getting squirrely, and just move on to another idea. We did notice that girls tended to sit together, where our groups are pretty balanced in terms of boy-girl numbers. And we did notice that the girls were sitting together, and I thought, let's mix these groups up. Like, let's not have this siloing of like this group and that group. And really, I think that backfired. I think that then made the students who were trying to find their peers or whatever feel a little more isolated as I scattered them out. And I think that they'll warm up to each other as we go through the math circle, and you don't really have to force any mingling around. At least in our case, I felt like it backfired a bit. We'll speak to this a little bit more when we get to activities, but another thing to be really careful about with young people is that their dexterity is not the same as ours. Their ability and precision with their hands is not the same. So like we did origami, but that sometimes requires a crisp fold, and not every kid could do that. And Jane, we were talking earlier, if part of your instructions require drawing or passing a drawing on to someone else, you can have really mixed results with that, and you can kind of go off the track of what you intended if you're kind of counting on these kids to be able to do things with their hands that they can't do. And again, for young people, this is maybe more of an issue, or you guys can tell me if not. But I don't think with maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know if with teacher circles, if you have like prize bins and stuff at the end, do you do like end of the session prize giveaway?
I do a book.
A book.
Okay. Door prize kind of thing, but
we don't, but we do provide dinner, which I think is a big prize.
Yeah, that's a very nice treat not to have to cook. It's very good. Yeah, we have snacks, and we've alternated our idea of whether we should or shouldn't have snack. It's our math circle's an hour and a half, and partially to my mind, I think that's just an hour and a half. You don't need a snack. It's just a window of time in the day. It's not that big. But on the other hand, they really appreciate it. They really like it. Maybe some kids haven't eaten in the hour and a half before that, so they are getting hungry. And so we're back to having snack. And then we have these little giveaways. So part of our budget is designated to that. With the grants we've been able to keep things very low or no cost. So most semesters we have about 5 or 6 meetings per semester. We mostly have charged nothing, but the most we have charged, I think, is like $10, and that covers all 5 or 6 meetings and allows us to buy snacks and then give away prize and kind of cover our bases in that way. And that goes into a fund that the math department has set up to take in funds like that, so that we can draw on it when we submit receipts. And then I'm not an expert on like education theory of young learners, but I was in the GK-12 fellowship program as a graduate student. And one of the things that lodged in my mind then that I draw back on occasionally now is that, not every child, even these similar ages, there are developmental milestones that your mathematical problem may be trying to get them to reach that they're just not there yet. So with our kids, we're closer to the concrete stage in terms of their ability to manipulate ideas and to do problems. They're much more rooted in the concrete and tangible. And it's like 12 and older is when you can do a little more abstraction from the specific to the general, and you can think in terms of more advanced operations. So it's not just the mathematical terms, right? Like, I guess that's my point. It's like there's mathematical terms, we understand the curriculum changes, but also just their ability to understand things. There are stages to our development to understanding certain types of problems. And so you might have something that seems fantastic on paper and it just kind of backfires because the kids they're just not there. That's not in their wheelhouse yet. They can't quite handle that. And then this is just a list, and I won't really dwell on this one very long, but I just want to say that I really took in from Brandy and some other folks who worked with young learners that you do have to be careful about liabilities and safety issues as well. So anything you do, if it's like a one day you're going to work with a younger group or something, there are just certain things that we put in place that we recommend other groups do too. So having sign in, sign out sheets with emergency contacts at multiple access points among the members, the leaders, and making sure you have all your clearances, and that you're mindful of the other things that go along with the young kids, including sometimes coping skills. Like if they do have a struggle, sometimes the outbursts will be totally not in proportion to what the given problem is. You're kind of dealing suddenly with a crying kid who maybe just had a bad morning. Also, you might be working with gifted children. We've had a few gifted children in our circles who, in just our personal experience, were very sensitive to feedback that wasn't just praise. So very happy with praise, very unhappy with anything except praise, and including like, oh, try it a different way, or, let's try this different strategy. So that's something that just kind of comes with working with younger kids. So that's kind of hitting those marks. But I think the most fun thing to talk about are the activities. And I will say that even among the activities I'm going to go through here, some fall more in one camp than the other. It's a wonderful thing when you find an activity that both you and the students love, but more often, one of you is going to like the thing more than the other. So you might appreciate something because you really see how like really well designed this problem is for a low entry, and you know as a mathematician that this is a very difficult, maybe unsolved problem, and you can appreciate that gap and their opportunity to work in that gap. But sometimes they're like, they're just not feeling inspired by that problem. And sometimes they love stuff and you think, okay, I guess. It's math, but it's not that, that ideal problem that you have in your mind when you're thinking about doing cool math with the kiddos. So anyway, we can talk about what some of your favorites have been too, or if you've tried some of these that I'm going to talk about here. So kind of among the greatest hits, one of us or the other group loved it the most. We've had Scavenger Hunt that involved cryptography, so solving clues. And the clues are based on this one that we've done. When we've done it, it's usually the last activity of a session. So that means we had 4 or 5 other meetings with that particular group at least in that semester. And then the clues are based on stuff that we did then. And we teach them just enough cryptography stuff to solve some scavenger hunt puzzles. And then there's exploding dots, which is, I think, pretty well appreciated in the math circle community. It's my understanding. Like people know about exploding dots and James Tanton's work on that. But I'll just say that we did that too, and it was really a big hit. MOBIUS strips, there's all kinds of great things you can do, especially with cutting MOBIUS strips. And math, magic, and origami. So the scavenger hunt that we've done usually involves taking about 3 or 4 types of, codes that you could teach them pretty quickly, like a Caesar cipher, which could be by 3 or could be by a different amount. They can construct, similar to this picture, a simple wheel. So you can just cut out an outer and inner alphabet and connect them with a little brad. And then you can have one per group. So it doesn't take a long time for everyone to make their own tool. We can have them form in groups. And then they have now a Caesar wheel. And then we give them a clue and let them try to use the Caesar wheel to figure out the shift. And then if they're stuck, then you can give additional clues. So that's really, something you can help them with if they're stuck. We also had the Pigpen or Masonic cipher. Do you guys know that one? It's like just sort of symbols, and it's an easy to remember alphabet within kind of a tic-tac-toe grid. And then based on the symbols, you can decode the message. And a lot of them really liked that, and they were writing their name all over the board in this because it looks like a different alphabet. Like the Caesar cipher and some other things are just our regular alphabet shuffled, but this one looks like different symbols, and so they love it. I would just say that in terms of lessons learned in doing this one, that if you're going to do a scavenger hunt, whether it's cryptography or not, it may be beyond your normal classroom. And so this is a time to make sure you have all of the help that you possibly can, and that you reinforce kind of the guidelines for behavior. I was not very happy last time we had a group and we went over the guidelines of what to do, walk from one point to the other, you should be able to see these helpers. And I had groups just running because they were treating it like, this huge race that was all about running from point A to point B. So, just, if you're going to have things that are outside the normal classroom, you might have behavior that's outside the normal classroom behavior. So just make sure you have lots of help. And I will say in terms of ciphers, the 4th and 5th graders I worked with, they did struggle. And so we tried to do a little bit of affine cipher stuff, but it didn't really take. So they were better off with other ciphers. I think if we had maybe 6th grade or up, I think it would have probably been okay. They just felt right on the border, like right there, but couldn't quite get there. So that was the scavenger hunt activity, and the kids often rate this as the #1 favorite activity if they did this in their session. So have you guys ever done a scavenger hunt? Something like that? So we have like clues posted around. And the other thing is, if you haven't done one, there is an order to it. You have to really think about the order to it so that you have groups not at the same place at the same time. And it takes a little bit of upfront planning.
We haven't either in the math, in the teacher circles, but I think definitely the idea can be adapted to be challenging, and I'm sure it would be engaging.
Yeah, we tried to be really engaging. Like we had this clue that had them try to find the millionth digit of pi, which who would know that? But we had posters on the math department wall, and one of them was all about pi, and it talked about how Martin Gardner proposed it would be 5, and then they calculated it. Eventually they got it, and it was 5. So there was these posters. We thought they would really get a kick out of finding the information on the posters, but they were oblivious to it. They were like, we don't see where the clue is. We don't understand. And so a lot of my like being extra clever, it didn't always land. But I think that slightly older groups, if you kind of said, well, let's look around, let's see if there's something we can see, they would find it without any problem. It's also cool to get, if you did it earlier rather than later, I think it's nice to have a sense of like ownership of a space or like comfort level moving around in a space. So if you have it in a building that they're going to be in, they're going to be, I don't know, maybe a little more confident there if they really explored it a little bit. So I have exploding dots here. Has anyone already done exploding dots with their groups? Because I think this is really good for young kids through teacher circles for sure.
Yeah, I think Jennifer has some experience.
Okay, great. Wonderful.
Just a side.
Yeah, I've done it too with teachers.
Oh, good.
The previous thing, the scavenger.
Yeah.
Made me think a little bit of, I think there was something in the recent MTC circular called breakout math with locks. You know what I mean?
Yes, I saw this. It looked very interesting.
Yeah, that's one of my notes to look more into that, to try to make one for the teachers. And it seems kind of based on the same idea. So basically there's various number puzzles, and from each of them you get a number, and then you unlock one of the locks. It's almost like an escape room idea.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So the way we had it is that our you would get a clue, and you had to decode that to know where the location was of the next clue. So we tried to hide, so they had to be hidden enough where they couldn't just see them and walk to them. And so that was part of the design that was a little bit tough, but fun. They really liked it.
Is any of you aware of any online resources that would be appropriate for a teacher circle on the scavenger hunt idea? Maybe they tried already this kind of activity and reported on it, like a nice article about it.
Right, yeah.
I don't. Did you check out the online resources that go with the Math Teacher Circle newsletter article? Because I had the physical copy, but it referenced that the online version had more materials available.
Oh, I haven't gotten to that, but I'll look at that.
Yeah, that's the only thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, that's a fun one. So exploding dots with young kids, I think you can do exploding dots like as soon as kids can count. Like I think our kids were fine with the processes involved. I don't know that we said bases, maybe except towards the end. So this may be something that the teachers understand immediately, but with the kids having never worked with different bases or not thinking that way, it's a game. It's just a game with rules. And then you can kind of talk about how it allows us to imagine counting in a different way, and that's how computers count. Kind of make that typical argument about the zeros and ones. But I just from a practical point, the way that we organized it is we had the sheets with boxes, and then we had those clear plastic, like makes it like a laminated cover type thing. You just slide the paper in there, and they were just doing dots and then working out some problems, and then we could move on to another problem and just erase that quickly. Or we had them come to the board and do some work in pairs. And because this was a new game, and because it's not based on anything that they've ever, I don't think it's based on anything they ever had to do in class before. So I think there was a lot of comfort with exploring all together. These are the kind of activities that it's almost like everyone's on the same footing. Do you know what I mean? Like some things it's, well, I don't know fractions. I don't know this, but for this sort of activity, everyone felt equally like capable of jumping in and exploring. So this one was a really big hit for us too. We really liked seeing the kids come out of their shells and feel really comfortable working and showing each other their work, because it was like a new game to play. Mm-hmm. So, and then there's, of course, James Tanton's site has lots of materials and resources there. Okay. All right, and so MOBIUS strips are fun. They're like one of the friendly math topics that a lot of people know, even if they don't like math or whatever, they like playing with MOBIUS strips. We've done this a few different ways. We've had an entire day devoted to topology and the study of spaces and what parts of a space change and what parts stay the same when you do things like cutting. And different activities related to topological, like umbrella. And we've also had days where it was just MOBIUS strip, just all MOBIUS strip all the time. And I think that those days are actually just as successful, even if the kids have, it's not the same scope, because what we try to do with the activity is to introduce them to the power of making a conjecture and then testing yourself to see if you were right. So one of the years that we did this, we had them just say what they thought would happen. And then, we would try a cut, and then we would talk about it. But this most recent time we gave them journals. And so for many activities, we would say, okay, write a conjecture in your journal and call it, Sam's conjecture, and let's see if this is what's going to really happen. And that was really fun to introduce them not just to the plaything of MOBIUS strips, but also to kind of building on what you'd already seen and trying to understand what will happen next. So that was really fun. The other thing we added the most recent time that we did this activity, which is just the basic, make a MOBIUS strip, cut it down the middle, what will happen? Or make a MOBIUS strip, cut an edge off, what happens? Or make other shapes and then cut them and see what happens. One thing that we did this most recent time that I recommend, especially with younger people, but I think any age would appreciate it, was a video by Hart, who did this video about wind and Mr. Ugg. So she has several videos. So if you look for that in the title, you'll find it. And it's all done on this cool, clear MOBIUS strip. So she's made it out of some sort of, like overhead projector paper, I don't know. And she has this whole story of this wind is walking around in her world, and she feels alone, but she knows she has a friend, Mr. Ugg, and she never sees him, but they leave messages for each other. And of course, you come to realize that this isn't all one and the same person. So it's really clever to have lots of messages that look the same or look readable. Not the same, but they look readable even through the MOBIUS, turns. So it's like a different message, but still makes kind of sense. So that's really fun. And then there's a part at the end where Wind gets a little pet dog, and the world starts to split apart. And you're left kind of on the edge of the seat. Is Wind going to be separated from her dog forever? But when we played the video, we would pause it sometimes, talk about things we noticed, think about this world a little bit, and then we would even do some MOBIUS strip stuff and come back to the video. So we didn't just watch the video straight through. It's a little bit long to just have had the kids watch it. And then by the end, when the world is splitting and Wind is getting separated from her doggy, they're pretty well equipped to answer like, "It's okay. Don't worry, Wind, like you're gonna still have your doggy." And so that's really fun because we had the smart board, you know, projecting the little show there, and they were kind of rooting for Wind, and they had an understanding of what was happening in the video because of the manipulatives they had in their hands. So that was a good addition, I think, to our MOBIUS strip stuff. Yeah, we just did interlinked MOBIUS hearts for the first time, so I'm sure there's all kinds of shapes you can come up with, and they won't always guess what they're going to be first, but it's fun to listen to them think through what could happen.
I think what's fascinating about this kind of activity is that we did a very similar thing with the middle school teachers just a year ago about trying to, in what ways can we play with these things, you know, cutting in what ways, cutting once, cutting a second time, you know, the results of the versus cutting the first time but in 3.
Yeah.
Cuts it somewhere and closer to the edge, closer to that, would that change things, and all kind of conjectures about that. And they were not guessing what's going to happen that often, and it's very hard. It's just amazing about this activity, how it can be approachable at, you know, the elementary level plus the teacher level.
I agree. I think that's a good lesson for the college students in my group, which is that when you watch young kids make conjectures, it's not just that they're saying something. I mean, there's just not a lot holding them back. You know, if they really think something will happen, they're not ashamed that it might be wrong. Like, and it's a kind of brave curiosity that I like that my students see, and they go, "Wow, that's really cool." They just, you know, they just went for it, and they were coming up with different ideas. And my favorite thing about that activity that we did is almost every single time, we haven't usually done it at the end, it's usually in the middle somewhere. And the next time that we see the kids, they'll tell me more things that they tried. They're like, "Well, do you know what happens when you twist it twice and then you cut?" And so they've taken this and owned it. They've made it their own. And that's always a treat when you get to introduce kids to, you know, a math playground like that. So it's great. Let's see. So another day, and I talked about this earlier today, and it's just a bag of tricks. So I have a collection. So if you ever like, well, we might do something like this, just know like I've compiled a collection. And so none of these are things I've invented, any of these activities, but they're things that we've kind of pulled together. And so we have a collection of resources or whatever, if you ever want to see them. But one that is a really good first day activity or last day activity is mathemagical tricks. The kids love these. They love it. And some of them include physical things like how to cut an index card so that a person can walk through it, how to cut a hole in it so that a person can walk through it. Other ones include more numbers related interesting tricks, like taking a Fibonacci sequence and being able to add the first 10 numbers in no time at all, so that you can seem like a math whiz or a math calculator. There's also this magic gopher. I don't know if any of you have ever played with the magic gopher, but he's a little mind-reading gopher. And I think I've got the website here, or you could Google probably magic gopher mind reader. And it's a really fun little gadget. It's been around a long time. He gives you just a couple of simple instructions about thinking about a 2-digit number and then subtracting from it and looking at a list of symbols. And he's going to read your mind to see what your number is. And this one's really fun because the first time you do it, there's always a big, oh, like big gasp through the room because the gopher read their mind. There are all these symbols on the page, but he definitely picked their symbol. But if you go through it twice, it doesn't usually take more than twice. Someone notices something. They're like, wait a minute. I think that something's happening here. And there's usually a pretty quick jump into what's going on. So they're quicker at this, my 4th and 5th graders, than I thought they would be. I really thought I'd have to walk them almost all the way there. But they noticed pretty quickly something about multiples of 9 and what was happening. The only drawback if you do this, I don't think you'd have the same troubles with an adult group, a teacher circle. But with younger kids, they're going to sometimes do the simple mental math that he asks them to do. They're going to do it incorrectly. And so we're going to do, okay, he's going to read everybody's mind. Everybody in the whole room, he's going to read everybody's mind. And they're going to go, he didn't read mine. And that's always because they made a mistake. But you have to kind of like navigate that situation delicately. So have them walk through it and go through their number again. But I was really impressed with my kids that they noticed the multiples of 9 at the heart of this, and also that on the sheet he gives you of possible answers, the number 99 and the number 9, I think they don't have the same symbols as all the other multiples of 9. And I pointed that out, and I said, well, why doesn't your claim hold for these multiples of 9? And they reasoned through why he could make them different. So it's really cute. And I think that this would be fun to play in a classroom or with anybody. So there's all kinds of tricks. There's another one we had where we taught them to multiply like 2-digit numbers or large numbers as long as the number 37 was involved. So there was a blog post we found about using the number 37. It has a special property that makes multiplication with it easy. And so we just have like a collection of math tricks, and it's fun. It's a real spirited day, but usually we don't get through a proof of many of them or any of them. They usually catch on to the magic gopher. So that's the good one. But the other ones are a little too sophisticated, and they don't usually see why it works, or they can't reason their way why it works, but they can apply it in the future so that they look like kind of like a whiz, like adding Fibonacci sequence together really easily. So that's one of those where they get a kick out of it, and we're like, okay, all right, it's fun. It's a good time with math. We're playing with numbers. It's okay. So let's see. Right, and like I said in the beginning, if you do origami, we did a few different types of origami or origami related activities. Modular origami. We did transforming origami. So on my screen here, you can see a guy at the bottom here is holding a shape, but it actually slides out and makes a large wreath as well. So it moves and folds. And we have incorporated showing them a not very long TED Talk video about the power of origami. And last time that we did this, we invited the parents to arrive, I don't remember, 15 minutes early or something, so that they could watch the video with the kids. And most of them were like, yeah, I'll be there. I'll be there early and watch it with them. So the kids had made these things, and then they could watch this kind of TED Talk about origami and its impact and applications in the world. So the parents really enjoyed watching that and seeing what the kids had made. But you do have to be careful. Folding, cutting straight lines is tough. We also introduced them to there's some hard stuff that you can introduce them to, like the fold and cut problems, and kind of get them thinking about some heavy duty stuff. But you also get to play a little bit, so that's a good one. Have you guys ever done an origami related one?
Yeah, we did it again. Yeah, I think last summer.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know Sunita Vatuk? She's in
Gotcha.
New York. Yes.
No.
She's a lot into folding and
Mm-hmm.
origami, and so we invited her over. She worked with us at Rutgers for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
So she did something that basically led to a theorem by a Japanese, I forget the
Mm-hmm.
name, which kind of says that basically any polygon or collections of polygon can even be disjointed that you draw on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
You could cut out with a single straight cut
Yes,
by
that's the
folding
folding
in
cut
some
problem,
special
right?
ways, and then you cut it out, and then only those things are cut out and the rest is left intact.
Oh,
That was kind of mind-blowing, and we
yeah.
started with simple examples, and she first gave us a sequence of folding to cut out the letter H,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and then we started from just a triangle, maybe isosceles triangle, and then some scalene triangles, and then some other shapes, and then trying to kind of generalize a little bit what's happening. Uh-oh. My 4-year-old is here. That's why I was muting the, well, you cannot see, but that's why that is there.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. We
Yeah, so
we
that
just
was a lot of
referred
fun.
to these things. We didn't have an expert in the room. That's amazing. Yeah.
And it was something about valleys and mountains in terms of when you unpack that what is folded down was folded up, and how many valleys and mountains can meet at a specific point, intersection point of all the folding, and some patterns that we're noticing about that. Yeah, they really enjoyed it.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
And I wanted to say about the mathemagical
Oh,
tricks.
yeah.
Jennifer and I are all about those. We love those things.
Yeah.
And just a few days ago, we saw on Facebook, it was this Tadashi thing circulated. I don't know if you saw it, about passing a disc through a square, and the diagonal of the square.
I did, yes. And my colleague came to work with that puzzle. I hadn't seen I hadn't seen it circulating, and he said, "This will fit through this." I embarrassed myself trying.
Yeah, so we were thinking this could actually, for people who haven't seen it, this would be a good exploration. And we were thinking, okay, then don't get it, what kind of little hints we can give it, or give it away, and something not as subtle as like what that guy said first. Oh, because you have some room to what do you say, to explore, going from 2D to 3D, you have some ambient space. So we're like, okay, that's not a good enough hint. What else could he give? But yeah, starting from that, it turns out that one of our former colleagues from Rutgers, her husband works with Tadashi, and she saw that done in person, and then she pointed us to a lot of other pretty magical things that this guy does. So
yeah.
Jennifer apparently stayed up all night watching those things.
That's great. Yeah, I think the clue that made it work for me was he said, "What would you do if I'd given you a square, like I'd given you yarn in the shape of a square?" Because of course you would, right? And so he said, so just think of the square you have. Could you treat it like it's a piece of yarn?
Okay, so he was giving you the hint for 1D to TD transition, and then you need to generalize to 2D to 3D. Cool.
And the index card thing really does. They like to repeat that once they've seen that too. That's pretty fun. So that has to do with. Have you seen this done in person? The index card cut.
No.
So that a person can walk through it. So it's impressive, and it doesn't require a big index card. It can be one of the small ones. And so I think I have the file that explains how to cut it. But you fold it in half, and then you do alternating cuts, top, bottom, but they can't quite meet. So you travel down the index card, top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom. And then at the folded part, because you fold it in half, you trim the top, very, very top part off. So when you open it, it's now accordion style, stretchy index card with a hole in the middle. And you can put a whole fourth grader through the hole. So, or a basketball or a book, whatever, whoever's comfortable traveling through the hole. So
And from a practical point of view, do you use index card that is kind of like that thicker kind of paper?
yeah, I do recommend doing or even an index card versus a similarly sized piece of paper, because even the index cards will sometimes rip on you. And it depends on that. Probably if I was going with younger kids, I would not even, I would make it where it was something like a basketball, something not very, very big, because then you can do it with fewer cuts. It doesn't require the same dexterity. I don't show them how to do it at first. I just challenge them, and they puzzle through it. they try to cut a hole through the middle. And then some people are like, well, but they must need to like spiral, or they have a sense that like they're going to have to make more space, but they don't know how to do it. But if it was smaller kids, you could give them a little bit more manageable task, and they wouldn't require as many cuts back and forth.
Yeah, maybe saying to pass through the textbook.
A book. Yeah, exactly.
Also at that grade level, so you're working with grades 3 to 5, if I remember?
Yeah, well, now we're 4 and 5 focused, 4 and 5.
When we did something kind of based on tricks and magic of various kinds with the middle school teachers, one of the things that a mathematician at Rutgers did was multiplying single digit numbers by fingers. I don't know if you know that one. So I think, was it any number? I'm trying to remember how it was. I do have a handout. So it was something, even to understand how to use it, you had to kind of pay attention. I'm not sure how. I can send it to you. You can decide.
I love it.
But then actually to explain why it works, that was kind of difficult even for our middle school teachers. So I'm not sure.
That's the problem with a lot of these, with the 4th and 5th graders, you're pre-algebraic, and like even with the Magic Gopher, there's a very simple algebraic, proof. It's not hard to see where he's going, but they don't have the same, they don't have that. So they have to reason through it. And I found that many of these were just beyond the scope of what you could kind of fairly ask them to reason through. So they're fun and it's cool. And I think that the fact that it's repeatable, that they can learn it, they understand it's not really magic. You wouldn't want them to really think it's magic. But they don't get all of the rules. And so sometimes I just have to say, well, keep coming back. We can talk about it more, or keep learning mathematics, because these are the kind of rules that you can investigate. So sometimes you just have to plant the seed and walk away. You don't always get to prove how everything works. So. But especially as a first day or a last day, the kids are really excited by this day.
At the end of the session, if you want, I can send you the handout that we had from that session.
Oh yeah, I love it. That'd be great.
There was another one that had to do with starting with a 3-digit number, reversing the order,
Yes, yeah, we had
fraction, and then ending up, everybody's ending with the 1089.
Yes, we have that one too. That one's a good one too. But I think we wound up not having time for it. But I added that to my collection, the 1089 one. That's a good one.
That one, parts of it, because basically you need to explain kind of 3 parts of the result, like explain 3 different things happening and why they would happen in general. I think at least 1 or 2 parts are actually kind of doable. Only the middle part is more difficult, I think.
Yes, that's absolutely ringing a bell. Yeah. Yep. So that's kind of, I think that's sort of my main collection, where I have some some materials collected. I have a few more that I do have, again, all about kind of sharing out ideas, and I have materials I'd be happy. Again, I haven't invented any of these, but we have things that we've kind of pulled together that have been helpful for us in our sessions. If you've done rational tangles, that's a pretty popular math circle one. We did make little boards for the kids, so just out of cardboard and shoelaces, so that we could do small table work. And we also invested in some pretty good cord, so that it was just better than the jump rope cord, kind of in sliding over and around each other. and the kids were okay with rational tangles to an extent. They can't do the fraction manipulation as quickly as adults, so that one can be much slower, and you can't go quite as much. So another one that's fun, you maybe saw this, it was in Horizons. I think Dave Richardson did a write-up about it that inspired us. Impossible cylinders are shapes that you can cut and fold and tape together to make a cylinder type object that looks like it has one shape from one side and another shape from the other side, almost like an optical illusion. And the only thing I would point out about that is that even though it's written up in terms of having a mirror there, if you don't have a mirror handy or want to buy, like we did for the kids, we bought these like ultra safe, shatter resistant mirrors. And it turned out that they just liked walking around, because you get the same effect by being on one side of the cylinder and walking around the table and looking at it from the other side. So don't go out and buy fancy shatter resistant mirrors if you don't already have them. And several other puzzles and things that we've gotten from other Math Circle folks include the wolves and sheep puzzle, which is great, but sometimes we give it as like you may start it, but you can't expect everybody to finish it. One of the big lessons it teaches you is persistence and patience. So I don't know if you want to dedicate a day to it, but it's a fun puzzle, and we made a little printable template with wolves and sheep that you can cut out and play with. And I don't know if you've done this in the teacher circle. I could imagine it would be really a big hit, but like kind of a sharing out of like what kind of games you like to play in your free time. So we have, me and Lance and Sophie, our daughter, as a family, just have lots of games. And we thought that all of the other families in our math circle, they may not have these games, and we put always in our flyer at the end of a math circle session, we say, here are the activities we did, and here are some other things you might want to play at home. But I thought, well, we should maybe have a day where we have all these games and they could come play them. And the families really liked that. So I'm always open to collections or suggestions for games, but some of our big ones are the set and blockus and on the dot. I'm really liking on the dot lately. Manifolds, which is the paper folding puzzle. But others, there's lots of others out there. So have you guys ever had a sort of sharing games, or actually as a group, or just discussing them?
Not really, but we should. And actually very soon, at the end of June, one of our participating teacher invited us to help with the family day open house thing they have at their school, and it's a middle school, 6 to 8. Yes. So I said, all right, I'll come down there, I'll bring some games and play. And also planning to maybe put some NCTM Illuminations games on some iPads. Cool games there.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
So I was curious about this river crossing puzzle. Is that kind with the cabbage, wolf, and
yeah, so there's that's another version of it. So the only reason I put this on here is that actually really one of my favorite days, but we had a guest lecturer, and we were just so happy to have a guest. We haven't had very many guests, circle leaders. I didn't vet his materials or whatever, and so just here we are going along, and he talks about river crossing puzzles and the wolves and the cabbage, and then he brought up another one with slightly different rules, and it's the cannibals and missionaries version with some pretty crude drawings. I was totally mortified. So I think that adults could probably groan and come on, but I just felt terrified that the kids were seeing this. Get it off the screen. move on. But anyway, it's actually a really great circle topic, river crossing puzzles and their solutions in general. So I guess just beware that there lurks out there previous, versions of these things that were kind of accepted, phrasings of the problem that I didn't even know about. So just don't do that to your kids. They were like, "What's a cannibal?" It was awful. So that's it. That's all the particulars I've kind of pulled together for here. But if there's anything that that I could share or post or whatever, be happy to do so.
Yeah, can
And we can post
all the magic and tricks and games. I love all of those.
Awesome. Okay. Good.
And I'm gonna do the same.
Okay, that'd be great.
I think you're gonna find some things applicable
Mm-hmm.
at that level.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you said at the beginning. I was curious. How did you get the circle started in terms of recruiting students?